Good morning. I'm Brian Nelson, Vice President of Institutional Advancement at Dunwoody College of Technology. Welcome to our lead speaker series. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to remind you that all attendees are in listen and view only mode, which means you will not be able to activate your webcam or microphone. You may use the chat feature to post questions for the Q&A session after the presentation. It's my great pleasure this morning to welcome and introduce Hutch Coburn. Hutch will be giving a presentation on the COVID Chronicles, capturing opportunities for technical graduates in consumer packaging. Hutch is a Senior Vice President of the Robotics and End-of-Line Business Line at Promoc, headquartered near Cincinnati, Ohio, with facilities worldwide. Promoc is a family of best-in-class processing and packaging solution brands serving manufacturers of all sizes and geographies in the food, beverage, pharmaceutical, personal care, and household and industrial goods industries. Hutch has spent a combined 28-year career in the capital equipment, telecommunications, hard drive, semiconductor, and automotive markets industry. Hutch is credited to 5 telecommunication patents that allow effective management and organization of cables. Hutch holds an MBA from the University of Minnesota, Carlson School of Business, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial and Systems Engineering from the University of Iowa. He also completed a 6 Sigma Green Belt certification. Hutch is a native of Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, and currently resides in Wayzata with his wife and children. Hutch has a strong connection to Dunwoody and is a tremendous partner as we move forward in the future. Please give a very warm welcome to Hutch Coburn.
Hey, thank you, Brian, and good morning to everybody, and thanks for having me down here at Dunwoody. The sun's up and it's not snowing, and that's always a pretty good way to start a day here in Minneapolis. So quickly, a little bit about me. As Brian mentioned in the introduction, I've had the good fortune to spend time in a lot of different industries over the years, meet a lot of interesting people, and really be involved with some really interesting and intellectually challenging things. With everything that's going on in the world around us, I thought I would spend some time talking about some of the more positive aspects of what the last year has brought us as it relates to COVID and some of those impacts, and assure the students here at Dunwoody that you're probably in the best place you could be in terms of what life can look like after you graduate. What I'm going to show you this morning is I'm going to give you a little bit of exposure to my organization, ProMach, some exposure to the industry, which is consumer packaged goods, and then really help you understand what some of those certainly challenges COVID has brought, but more importantly, some of the significant changes and opportunities that have been created as a result. I realize the audience might not be entirely students, but I have essentially aimed the presentation at them. And so I hope you find it interesting. Quickly about our organization, we have approximately 4,000 employees. We're primarily concentrated in the US and Europe. We're moving into South America and Asia. Approximately 52 facilities worldwide. And what's really interesting is that most of our brands average about 39 years in business. So there's a lot of depth, a lot of bench strength, a lot of understanding. And what's even, I guess, further unique about that is that most, if not all of them, were started and founded, in some cases, by a single person in their garage. So there's a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit that still exists, and it's really a nice combination of that spirit. And in terms of size and perspective, we're shipping approximately 12,000 machines each year, and that number continues to grow. So we think that there are approximately 200,000 pieces of equipment out in the field, many of which have been in service for more than 2 decades, and that presents certainly opportunities for you as graduates as well in terms of aftermarket service and support. These are brands that essentially many of you may not have heard of. Maybe some have. If you're a soon-to-be graduate, it's probably to your advantage to take note of some of these. And both our organization as well as our customers, which I'll touch on in a moment, offer significant career opportunities. This is a view that essentially mimics the manufacturing line. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that that's where our brands that focus on ingredient mixture. So this would be the liquid or the powder or the food product. There's a lot of science and engineering that goes into that part of the equation for sterilization, for nutrition, for shelf life, for taste. All those things kind of start at that end of the line. We also have organizations that do full turnkey design and integration, and then all the individual brands as we go down the line, where the product has to be filled, so it has to be put into some sort of container. That container has to be filled, capped, sealed. Usually there's some sort of decorative label with the branding that goes on it. We do trays for protein, which I'll show you. We have various ways to handle and sterilize product for shelf-stable products. A growing part of the business is labeling and coding, and that's really where information is put onto the product or onto the package to enable end-to-end traceability for safety and other reasons. And then robotics and end of line may not be a term that means a whole lot to you all, but this is where, again, this is where it fits into this part of the equation. And this is as the product has been packaged or put into containers, those containers, whether they're pouches or boxes or cartons or jugs or cans or bottles of some sort, have to be aggregated, put into boxes for shipment or display, ultimately put onto a pallet, and then onto some form of transport. And then on the far right, we have a significant but growing presence in the pharmaceutical space for either solid or liquid dose opportunities. Here's just a quick snapshot of what some of this could mean to you in terms of the type of things that you might have an opportunity to work on as a graduate of Dunwoody.
The magnitude of capabilities can be demonstrated with this container first being depalletized and set in motion to be filled, capped, labeled, and date-coded. The consumer packaged goods then travel along conveyors equipped with diverters, accumulators, and gentle handlers to get bundled into packs. Heading towards the end of life, Promoc's capabilities include everything needed to get packaged product out the door, from case formers and case packers to pallet loaders and stretch wrappers. Real-world installations also face challenges, like space constraints and facility obstacles, and Promoc's project management team considers all the variables and accounts for the broader vision, helping customers reach optimization of each unique packaging line configuration.
So that's just a quick overview of the kinds of technologies that we're talking about. I'm gonna bring it down one layer lower, and many of you may recognize some of these products that we all tend to come in contact with and use, each and every day. So we have cookies as an example, just one representative product of how we convey and load. When it comes to liquid products, they're oftentimes put into blow form molded containers. So think of laundry detergent, things like that. And they tend to ship in bulk. And then we have equipment that unscrambles those and orients them so that they can then be filled. I think we're showing shampoo or soap here. And then there's a lot of technology that goes into capping. So you can think of when liquids have to be put into a container at a very high rate of speed. In fact, they move so quickly that it's really hard to actually distinguish them individually with the naked eye. So a lot of technology to evacuate the air inside the container so that the product can get in. Many of us like shelf stable products. So think of canned beans or fruit. So they're cooked under pressure in what's called a retort. So that may be a term that some of you are not familiar with. And then of course the decorative labeling that we're all familiar with. On the top left of the screen, we've seen a lot of development in packaging and pouch technologies, everything from popcorn and motor oil, as you see here. Those pouches and products are then typically coated, again, for traceability and safety reasons. So there's a lot of activity in that regard. Pharma packaging, this would be what we've shown here is the solid dose form. There are also many liquid dose forms. So there are some unique technologies that allow for the formation of the packs that you can see with medicine. So with aspirins or Tylenols and things of that nature, those containers. Tray packaging. So everyone's probably familiar when you go into the grocery store and you're going to buy some sort of protein, whether it's steak or chicken or something else. They're all in trays that are wrapped and of course labeled. We convey things like pie and other confectionery products. We multi-pack and bundle various drinks and cans. Pizza is probably a hot item here at Dunwoody. I know it has been in our household with the advent of COVID. So we have some technologies that can wrap those at high rates of speed. We have other equipment that opens and essentially forms cardboard and corrugate containers. so that some sort of product can be then put in them, and those boxes then have to be sealed. It's usually via tape, but there are some other technologies. That box then has to be coated. Those boxes then need to be put on a pallet. The palletized load then has to be what's called stretch wrapped, and that's where some pressure and tension is applied to the film, and that's to ensure safety and quality of the product as it's transported. And then we have robotics that are essentially sprinkled and although they're concentrated towards the end of the manufacturing line, they are beginning to find their ways further upstream as we go. The machine can only be as good as the interface sometimes, or the efficiency of the overall line. So we have a lot of opportunity in software development and engineering. And then finally, we have groups that handle turnkey applications. So end to end, they can help with the facility from breaking ground to final installation. And then finally, all of that is supported, what we call aftermarket, with, you can imagine, with all of the equipment that's in the field and the high run rates. Aftermarket parts and service also provide significant opportunities for graduates like you. If we look at the same market from the standpoint of market segment, we have food and beverage, and food and beverage in North America is approximately 50% of all capacity and consequently machine demand. And then the remainder of the market is more or less broken up somewhat equally between the other four categories that we show here. So again, pharmaceutical is one that is really growing. You can imagine with not only the population demographics in the United States, but elsewhere in the world, that's a very promising market for us. And then personal care, that one continues to evolve. We're all familiar with various types of chemicals that we use on a day-in basis. And then finally, in terms of other categories, it can be everything from floor tiles to clothing items, even foam blocks for nursery and horticultural applications. So almost everything you touch or use or come across in your day-to-day lives runs down a packaging line in some way, shape, or form. This is a view of traditional customers for us, many of which are household names and global names. And this is where the story gets really interesting. So I'm gonna diverge for a minute around COVID and what some of the early challenges we faced, as not only as an organization but as an industry as a whole, and then ultimately tie that back to again why Dunwoody graduates and students like you are in a really good position if you choose to go into this industry. So these are some significant changes that and they may resonate very well with others that are on the presentation here. But COVID, I think it's safe to say, kind of hit us all somewhat unaware. And in hindsight, it seems it probably happened a little bit more slowly than it felt like at the time. At the time, it felt like it kind of came on overnight. And so as an organization, we found ourselves having to suddenly think about our facilities and the density of the employees in them. And so we had to, in some cases, take single operating shifts and try and stretch those out over 2 shifts. We had to start to hire people because of the extremely volatile demand created as a result, which I'll touch on. And what I mean by that is there was a tremendous shift from the hospitality industry, so bars, restaurants, all the places we like to go, this massive shift in demand towards retail. And not only did the retail environment experience a significant increase in demand, but the way that consumers are buying products in that retail space is also rapidly changing as well. At the same time, we had to figure out how to migrate employees to work remotely, which created all kinds of challenges, but again, opportunities that I think, my own view is that some of these changes are probably more permanent now, which I think can ultimately be a good thing for all of us. We had a lot of variation over our customer base, so some paused while they tried to understand what the ultimate impact of COVID might be. Others saw it immediately as an opportunity to either gain share or increase their presence as part of an essential business. I mean, we all have to eat. And at the same time, changed the way that we interacted with one another. So suddenly a lot more reliance on social media and other ways to virtually interface. We had tremendous thought and effort given to our supply chain. So, again, we had to deal with things that were somewhat unprecedented in terms of flights being canceled, freight containers being canceled, borders being closed. The value of a robust and flexible supply chain for those that had it was remarkable, and for those that didn't, it really created some challenges. We also, again, had rapidly fluctuating demand as consumers started to rethink and react to the situation. Again, this massive shift from hospitality to retail really created some, challenges, but again, opportunities. And most customers, when they invest in a piece of equipment like ours, oftentimes they're multi-million-dollar investments. And so what had been common practice is that a team of individuals from a respective customer would typically come on site, and they'd want to see the product that they had ordered and or designed run their product on a real-time basis. So all of that we had to quickly figure out how to conduct virtually as well. And then I touched on some of this earlier, but from a service standpoint, many of our customers had factories and facilities that were highly restricted in terms of outside employees or partners being able to enter. So it really created some challenges and consequently some opportunities for for how we do that on an ongoing basis. I'm sure if I could see the audience, I'd see a lot of heads nodding here. This is one example. This is a facility that we have up in Alexandria, Minnesota, and you can see in the picture that the workspace was fairly organized, but also fairly dense. And this is an example of having to essentially reinvent and lay out a facility or a portion of a facility in a very different way to not only create appropriate distance and space for safety reasons with the advent of COVID, but also rapidly accelerate our ability to ship product and be responsive to those high spikes in demand to keep shelves stocked. We have other examples, and here's one from our labeling division. I think we all probably walked into a grocery store at the peak of COVID. It's not fortunately happening so much anymore. We'd walk in and experience empty shelves, and that's something that I think, at least in my lifetime, has been extremely rare and far and few between. But Jose and his team were able to rise to the occasion and help a local customer in Texas ship 100,000 pounds of ground beef and steaks over the weekend, effectively to replenish those shelves. We have another example of a pharmaceutical company. This would be the pill pack. So when you purchase medicines and the hard pills are in individual foil packs that you tear off and pop out. That same technology, the team was able to repurpose to effectively make face shields and masks to donate to the local community. So, lots of opportunity to be creative in terms of how we manufacture, some opportunity to be extremely responsive to help replenish shelves, and then finally a way to repurpose some of that resource to help our local communities. So this has created what we might guess to be a new normal. I think we're still in it. We don't exactly know. And this is where some of the then versus now, again, what initially were perceived as significant challenges, I think now have become significant opportunities for those that think of them that way. And I'm encouraging you as students and soon to be graduates to consider all of this in that very same light. So then, and this is, we'll talk about it just generally speaking as pre-COVID, packaging drove consumers. So a lot of thought went into attractive packaging or convenient packaging, and consumers would move to it. What's happened now is that consumers actually drive packaging and their behaviors accordingly. And what I mean by that is it used to be about variety packs or varied pack counts. There were a lot of interest in natural products or reusable products. And what we've seen now is, and maybe social media has something to do with this because the word can travel so quickly, is that we see major spikes in demand and pressure to increase production for very specific items. I mean, when consumers used to essentially avoid products that had, chemicals or bleach or alcohol, now there's a tremendous demand for those products in light of what's happened with COVID. The good news for you as potential participants in this industry and as soon to be graduates is every time there's a change, and I've just highlighted an example here, but every time somebody in a marketing department wants a different size or a different shape or a different package conglomeration, that usually turns into an order for an upgrade or a retrofit or in a lot of cases a new piece of equipment or a new manufacturing line. So this industry is constantly changing and evolving. So with all of that change and configuration, what that translates into is a need for product to be very flexible to be able to accommodate some of that. And here is just a quick video of a case packaging machine to show you what that can mean. So what you're going to see is a few different product configurations, and try and pay attention to the speed of the product, the type of the product, and how it's being organized and packaged. I believe in this case, this is a frozen food, a ready-to-eat product, and you can see it's been aggregated and pushed. It's been being put into containers. This is a beverage of some sort, so you can see a little bit different shape and style of container and speed as well. And essentially, the packaging case is being formed around it. And so again, it's the same general type of equipment that has to be designed to accommodate that sort of flexibility. Here we see single serve salad dressing packs being put into their final containers for shipment. So you can see that box says keep refrigerated. Some of our equipment has to be designed to operate at rapid speed in very cold environments. We have customers that have fish farms in both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, as an example. And so they're effectively doing the initial cleaning of those fish, and then they're transported to a cold facility where, again, the robots have to have insulation and heated blankets around them to effectively operate. So again, just an example of how that can dictate the machine design. So I mentioned earlier that there was a massive shift in demand to the retail environment, and that retail environment was also changing. This is a term that I think is relatively new, at least for me, this BOPIS, so buy online and pick up in the store. And that's something that many of you may have already, most likely have already done. So pre-COVID, that part of the market was experiencing pretty solid year-on-year growth, around 15%, with roughly 60% of the population in some way, shape, or form at some point ordering something online and then driving to the store to pick it up. So what's changed rapidly, and this is just a snapshot from 2019 to 2020, is that we've seen a spike. If the trajectory stays, we're estimating that it's now on about an 18% overall growth rate, but it had a huge uptick in that same time period. So what we're seeing now is that approximately 80% of consumers are going to buy online but pick up in the store, and they have been and will continue to be doing that more frequently, with 90% preferring home delivery over a store visit. So, when you put that in perspective, I think we've all seen this shift towards we see Amazon trucks much more frequently in our neighborhoods and streets now. And that's a reflection of the increase in e-commerce sales. So e-commerce sales between 2019 and 20 were up a little over 40%. You can see the retail sales, and this translates into trillions of dollars, but a 7% increase year on year, which doesn't sound like a tremendous amount, but again, just the magnitude of the dollars are significant, and the information here is a little bit dated at this point. And then what that means from a web perspective, the percentage of retail sales conducted over the web, which feels like a massive amount, is really increased from just under 16% to a little bit over 21%. And so what feels like a massive and is and has been a fairly massive transformation still means that there's still a tremendous opportunity for e-commerce applications, and that we're relatively early in that overall transition. So that's going to continue to drive opportunity for you all. Everybody's probably familiar with the white mailer packages. When you do order something online, it doesn't always come in a box. Sometimes it shows up in a white envelope, for lack of a better description. You can see in the bottom right. Here's just a quick snapshot of what that looks like and how that works. So these are sometimes more semi-automated applications to accommodate a wide variety of product. In this case, you're going to see jigsaw puzzles and what I think are business cards and towels and some other textile items. And so the product has to be identified, so we know what's in it once it's put into the envelope. And then the machine is essentially gauging the size of the product coming down the conveyor, and it forms the envelope around it, or the mailer around it. And then of course it has to be labeled. So again, for shipment and tracking purposes, we know what's inside the mailer. So again, just a quick snapshot of what's probably familiar to some of you. In terms of labor, I think we were all experiencing various degrees of labor shortages. This is all pre-COVID. Talented people were very hard to find, and that by itself drove a substantial interest in automation, and return on investment were effective, and the industry was continuing to invest, but for slightly different reasons than now. So now you take all of that was already underway, and I'm going to show you some video here so you can understand just kind of the magnitude of what we're talking about. But when you have highly manual operation with people in extremely close proximity, and now COVID hits the scene, it really becomes challenging for some of those customers to be able to maintain that critical food supply, and that's in effect what we're seeing happen now. An interesting data point is that in 2020, most organizations, manufacturing and consumer goods organizations, had a robot somewhere in their organization, roughly 75% of them. And now 95% expect that within 10 years, there'll be a much higher concentration of robotics performing a lot of these tasks. So again, as a graduate, that should be of interest to you all. So it used to be that kind of the obvious places to automate were we called the 3Ds. If it was dark, if it was dirty, or if it was dangerous. These would be parts of a manufacturing facility where maybe the work wasn't as ergonomic as it could be, involved a lot of lifting, a lot of manual interaction. And what's happening now is that to attract workers to your organization, they want bright, clean environments that aren't dangerous. But the definition of dangerous has suddenly changed. It might not be necessarily work tasks are not ergonomic. Now it's more about COVID and proximity and distance, and that's really created some challenges, but also again some opportunity. What you're going to see here in the bottom left of the screen, this is a produce manufacturing line. So if you've purchased a tray of vegetables or a tray of fruit, this is effectively how they're packaged, or how they were, and in some cases still are being packaged, albeit in COVID with much fewer people, and consequently a little bit less output. You can see that there's a lot going on in the bottom left screen. So it's a cold environment. You can see that people are dressed. They're having to wear insulated clothing. The temperatures are just above freezing to keep the produce cool. You can see the manual carrying. This gentleman's about to dump an entire tote of what I think are tomatoes into the bin next to the workers there. You can see all the produce that's being wasted that's on the floor. You can imagine that if you're picking and measuring and weighing that produce by hand, that the amount of product in those trays is highly varied. The screen to the right represents how we've essentially automated that same process. And you'll notice that there are very few individuals now on this line. So from a safety standpoint, it's much improved. It's much faster. It's much more accurate. A lot less food's being wasted, somewhere on the order of 8 to 10%, which is a significant part of the food supply. And so again, this really represents an opportunity for how you as a graduate can really have an impact on the health and safety of your communities and customers. If software is of interest to you, we have a lot of development going on in that regard. What I'm going to show you here is an interface. So a machine can be really smart, but it's even smarter if the way that it interacts with the human is optimized. And so again, this is just one example. This is when I showed you the pallets before and all the product that has to be arranged in a certain way on the pallet so that it can be cost effectively contained and shipped. This is software that allows an operator or technician on the line to be able to reconfigure it quickly, but it's also smart and it learns from those operators and it learns from the dimensions and the inputs of all the box sizes and weights and heights. And so it can also recommend certain configurations. It can check for interference and it can make that whole process a lot more efficient. So let me just show you that here real quickly. And this mimics a design that's in a potato chip manufacturer that you'll see as we get to the end here. So we try and make it as intuitively interactive as we can. And again, what's going on in the background is the software is checking the recipe to make sure it's actually possible to do. And in just a moment, you'll see that's where it fits in as part of an overall end-of-line application. Again, in this case, there are potato chips in those boxes. What's really interesting, if you're paying attention to the market, or if you're really into the automotive arena, there's a lot of talk about self-driving cars and autonomous driving, and a lot of those technologies that involve being able to sense the environment and respond to the environment around you, we are now incorporating into what we call intelligent autonomous vehicles. So if you had an opportunity to go into a manufacturing plant in years past, you may have seen a guided vehicle, and they used to follow essentially a metal track that had to be laid into the floor. And so it had very limited capability, and its ability to learn or reconfigure its route was pretty limited. So that is all changing, and it's changing rapidly. And so in areas where labor is in short supply, or there's a distribution warehouse that in many cases can be operated remotely and with very little reliance on some of those labor shortages, these vehicles are becoming much more sophisticated, much more intelligent. They can talk to one another, they can talk to the manufacturing line, and here's an example of how that can work. So the robot essentially knows where it's going. It's been called to pick up palletized loads, so it knows right where to pull in. The palletized and secured loads are loaded onto the vehicle, and one vehicle goes back to pick some more up, and the loaded vehicle, goes on further downstream towards shipment. There's a lot of safety features built in. The zones are programmable, so the machine can detect something in its path, and as it gets closer, it can take whatever action the client deems necessary. So they're very safe and becoming even safer every day. So with all that being said, there has been a lot of chaos in the world. I think that's probably a fair term. But again, from my perspective, and I hope yours, it's really created more opportunity than I think some of the challenges that we saw early on. I was down here earlier in the week, and I think it was Rich that was saying that the conversations they're having here at Dunwoody, and I know we're having in our organization, is more about what are the things that have changed that we want to and should make more permanent ways of doing business and interacting, so we can learn what's really worked well and again establish that new normal. So just to give you a snapshot of the type of opportunities that we have in our organization, again, our customers offer significant career opportunities as well. I just wanted to pause here for a moment and line up some of the types of opportunities that we have currently against your curriculum here at Dunwoody. And again, happy to follow up if anyone would like to reach out. So part of that new normal. And what's really, I think, exciting to a lot of younger potential employees and graduates is, it used to be that you essentially had to show up into an office or into a facility, and that still can be a very important component of your day-to-day career. And some people thrive on that interaction, and we certainly want to encourage it. What we've seen is the ability to fairly transparently and seamlessly, depending on the role, for people to now have a choice to work remotely and do it quite effectively. Now, we all may aspire to being able to do our jobs from the beach. I haven't quite been able to figure out how to do that yet, but maybe in your career span that may become a reality for you. So, in conclusion, what I've tried to do is paint a picture of not only our organization but the industry as a whole. There's fantastic opportunities, even in the midst of a global pandemic. It's been thriving. Lots of change, lots of innovation. It's very exciting. So, as potential graduates and students, I encourage you to, think big and think creatively. And this industry, again, it's a wonderful way to be intellectually challenged and have a very positive impact on both your local communities and the greater world as a whole. So I hope you'll give it some consideration as you plan next steps. Thank you for your time, and Brian, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, Hutch. Thank you for your great insights this morning. We have some questions from our audience. Loved all the videos, loved seeing the manufacturing, and amazing how far technology's come. Can you, what challenges do you see having to overcome, excuse me, you have to overcome with the rebooting after COVID? What type of things do you see happening that you'll need to re-engineer in some of the plants that you've had to make some changes? What's the rebooting process look like?
Well, so that's a great question, Brian. And the way I like to think of it is essentially from the outside in. So commercially speaking, we're not able to still interact on a human-to-human level in person like many of us had been accustomed. And that maybe works okay when you have relationships in certain parts of the industry and have known one another, say, for 2 decades or more. But there's a significant challenge as it relates to how do we cultivate new relationships on a virtual basis. So I think that'll be a continued area of learning. How do you find new customers? How do you develop new relationships? How do you gain trust and credibility when the ways that we used to rely on it have now changed? And then so you bring that same philosophy back into the manufacturing environment. And we think about if you're a new employee, it used to be that you would come in and you could meet everybody face to face. You could have lunch. You could go to a company picnic. You could have a customer event. And now those things have all changed. So I would imagine it's challenging to be a new employee at the moment when you have to essentially meet an organization and do it somewhat virtually or somewhat remotely. So I think that'll also be a continued area of opportunity and change as we go forward.
But I think that's a great answer. I think one of the, I look at your business model and the idea that it was challenging when you had different states and different countries pre-COVID. What are you seeing are the challenges now as there's different requirements in different states, different restrictions, plus different restrictions from country to country. How have you navigated that, and how have you worked through that?
Well, so I would say in that regard, Brian, I think we're pretty fortunate to be living in the United States, where there's a tremendous market opportunity. And as an example, and we have businesses that are located in Canada, but the Canadian border it's not closed per se, but it's very difficult with some of the quarantine restrictions to be able to seamlessly and quickly move people back and forth. And so again, depending on where you live relative to where your customers are or where their facilities and factories may be, we didn't think in the past as much about some of those border restrictions. It was pretty easy to move people around to wherever the challenge or opportunity presented itself. And that has, effectively just been turned upside down. We still see significant challenges with some of the borders in Europe and some of those quarantine restrictions in terms of people being able to move back and forth. So there's a lot of equipment and know-how that that transitions back and forth. So again, in some cases there are tremendous opportunities, and then in some cases there are tremendous challenges that we continue to have to overcome. So until that resumes some level of pre-COVID normalcy, it might not ever go back to the way it was, but that'll be a continued change and progression, at least for us, for the foreseeable future.
Good deal. We've got time for one more question, and if people have other questions and want to send them along, we're happy to pass them along to Hutch so
Sure.
we can answer those later. But the final question would be, with the increased use of robotics and technology, what skills gaps do you see with your employees that currently or in the near future constrain your business growth opportunities, and what can be the most beneficial to help close those gaps for you?
So we would like Dunwoody to increase its enrollment. That's an easy answer, Brian. So we need more students like those that are attending Dunwoody. With all of the software and electronic and mechanical elements that have to come together to produce equipment like this and solutions like these, each of those are pretty critical parts of that effort. So I mean, the bottom line is we need more skilled graduates.
That sounds great. We're working hard to make sure that happens, Hutch. I appreciate the endorsement for that, and thank you for taking your time today to visit with our community and our constituents. I was very interesting and was really cool to see all the automation. I can't wait to see where that changes. So it's great to see that you're on that leading edge of where manufacturing is in automation. Please join all of us for our next lead presentation on Thursday, March 4th. Ben Granley, president of Werner Electric, an esteemed Dunwoody alum and member of the Dunwoody Board of Trustees, will be our guest that day. Thank you again, Hutch, and everybody have a wonderful and safe day.